First of all, welcome, Travis. Travis is Vice President of Commercial Sales at DEDRONE, very good friend and partner of Matrix Space. So thank you for joining today. Many of you might know DEDRONE operates globally at a lot of major organizations, venues, facilities in all aspects of, I think, DFR, but drone, counter drone operations, a lot of security oriented operations. You're actually one of the first counter drone companies to earn Support Anti-Terrorism by Fostering Effective Technologies Act, which is from the Department of Homeland Security. So a big achievement there. And as many of you know, the whole counter UAS movement is growing rapidly as we're dealing with problems of either malicious or just unmanaged drone operations. So with that, let me hand you over to Travis to cover today's topic, which is drone detection and management, especially DAA options, and closely tied to that, of course, the whole legislative issues and regulatory issues that we're all having to work through as well, especially in these very public kind of operations. So with that, let me hand it to Travis. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Anne. So I wanted to use today's session as primarily as an educational session. As you can imagine, with my background in DDrone, a lot of the references that I'll make are with regard to our technology and how we deploy systems. But in our experience in working with a wide variety of different industries around the world, we have a lot of experience in deploying these types of technologies and the different types of sensors that go into not only counter drone, but also enabling drones to be able to fly. So as I'm going through this, I want to make sure that I kind of make that clear is that I will try to make this as general and educational as possible. I definitely don't want this to be a sales pitch and try to sell you on why DDrone is the global leader in airspace security, which we are, but at the same time, I don't want this to be a sales presentation. I want it to be educational and speak about, for example, radio frequency technology and the different regulatory limitations when it comes to detecting drones by radio frequency, or even the evolving landscape when it comes to enabling drones to be able to fly and the current regulations that have limited the expansion and adoption of whether it be drone as a first responder or drone package delivery. So we'll really kind of split the conversation in those two lenses, if you want to think of it that way. But the presentation that I'll bring up is very DDrone focused. But like I said, I am going to make it more of a general presentation here. And one thing I also want to encourage is that as I'm going through this, if anybody has any questions or if you see something that sticks out that you'd like to discuss or ask questions about, feel free to jump in at any time. Happy to make this collaborative as we go through this and take questions as we go. So let me go into slideshow mode. And just to confirm, everyone can see my presentation here that you see?
Yes, sir. It looks great.
All right, beautiful. So to start things off, again, I like to reiterate the mission statement that we have at DDrone because I think this really sets the stage for the two different polarizing sides or missions that we focus on. Because on one hand, over the last decade at DDrone, we've focused on protecting from the threat of drones. I think that this is probably one of the most rapidly evolving threat, not just here in the United States, but globally as well. I think everyone's seen the media coverage of some of the footage that's taken place in Ukraine on the battlefield, or what's taken place in Israel, or anywhere in the Middle East. And thankfully, here in the United States, we haven't seen any of that terroristic type of activity yet. But I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when we start to see that. And so it's very important to be able to put the right systems in place and the right airspace security in place to be able to be prepared for that type of threat. So we'll kind of break the first half of the discussion into the counter drone or drone detection side of the discussion. And then on the second half of the discussion, we'll talk about leveraging that same type of technology and the same type of sensors that are used for drone detection and detecting small little aircrafts in the airspace, and leveraging that for enabling good drones to be able to fly. Again, whether it be drone as a first responder type of programs or drone package delivery, medical device delivery, these are all projects and initiatives that have had a start, but they've been limited by some of the regulatory landscape and the need to maintain visual line of sight of your drones and the operations that you're working on. And so we'll talk about how these same sensors can be tuned to detect other aircrafts that are in the sky and really make it safe for drones to be safely integrated into the national airspace system, and how the type of technology can really be used for both different use cases here. So that's how we'll kind of frame the conversation. Again, I like to also just kind of go over a little bit of background about DEDRONE and about our experience, because of course you've been gracious enough to invite me to this presentation here, and I want to make sure that everyone understands our breadth of experience in the industry and why I feel that we're very well positioned to be speaking on the topic. We are trusted nationwide or globally, and operational in over 32 different countries, 5 of the G7 nations. And the amount of industries that we work in, ranging from airports to non-US governments, federal entities, public safety agencies, airports, critical infrastructure, stadiums. I mean, this wide breadth of experience gives us feedback from all of these different industries about the different types of threats that they're experiencing. For example, the threat that is being experienced at a stadium, like an NFL stadium, may be very different than what we're seeing on the battlefield or what we're seeing at critical infrastructure sites. So being able to take all of these different data points and all of the different experiences that our customers have give us a tremendous amount of knowledge and understanding of the different types of threats that we're seeing across the globe. And I hope to be able to kind of convey some of these and educate everyone about the different types of threats, the different ways that you can also counter these threats, and also, of course, like I said, the regulatory landscape that limits some of those capabilities here in the United States, and also how it's different globally as well. And so another kind of use case of some of our experience in the industry would be with regard to the World Cup at in Qatar back in 2022. In some regards, this was considered the largest counter drone deployment in history at that time. A total of 46 different locations, hundreds of different sensors, and over 900 square kilometers in coverage. And one of the unique things that you see on this slide here is with regard to shooting drones down or jamming the signal of the drones. And that's another regulatory thing that we're going to talk about here, about how that's limited here in the United States, how it's different in other countries, and how that regulatory landscape is changing. Because probably the number one question that we get when we're talking about airspace security is, yes, it's great that you can tell me that there's a drone over my facility, but what then? Am I allowed to shoot that drone down? What am I allowed to do? What are my responses and the actions that I should take? And we'll be able to talk a little bit about that as well. And so, with all of this experience and all of the different challenges that everyone's facing, it all kind of boils down to one simplistic thought of what is the primary challenge that everyone's trying to address. And really, it comes to unauthorized access. At the end of the day, I don't think anybody could have predicted how quickly drones would be so widely adopted, not only here in the States, but globally as well, and how quickly it would become a problem. For example, at an airport, at the Gatwick incident that took place, just one drone incursion cost that airport $64.5 million. Anytime you have to shut down an airport and airplanes have to be diverted, airlines start losing money, the airport starts losing money. And so this is a major issue, especially when it comes to airports, because there's money on the line and they are literally losing millions of dollars anytime a drone flies into their airspace. And especially, I'm assuming that pretty much everyone on this call and a lot of other people are probably on airplanes fairly frequently. And the thought of flying into a major airport and thinking that there may be drones in the airspace as you're coming in for a landing is a terrifying thought. And so needing to install and put in technology to be able to not only identify these drones, identify where the pilots are, and make sure that that airspace stays clear not only for the sake of the airport and their revenue, but also for the sake of the safety and everybody who's flying into all of these major airports is a very important factor. Also, like I mentioned, the nuclear power plants and other critical infrastructure sites around the country are seeing a major increase in nefarious activity around their facilities. In a lot of cases, a lot of these drones have been utilized just to fly over. And while it may look very harmless when it comes to a drone just flying over a facility, it could also be somebody casing out the facility, trying to understand the layout or the blueprint of the facility, and planning future acts, whatever they may be, nefarious activity. And so having that ability just to understand what the airspace looks like and know if there are drones flying frequently over a facility is extremely important to safeguard our country's national infrastructure. Um, Correctional facilities, huge problem at correctional facilities. These drones are not just toys, they do have the ability to carry payloads. And while you may not think that it would be a large problem, it's actually a very big problem for correctional facilities where people are taking contraband, whether it be drugs or weapons or whatever it may be, cell phones, taking them, strapping them to drones, flying them over the fence line, dropping them on the rooftop or dropping the contraband somewhere in the yard, and then flying the drone away. So the days of trying to smuggle contraband into a facility by having somebody bring it in or throwing it over the fence or something along those lines, those are no longer the methods that criminals are using to do this. They're taking it on a drone, they're flying it from 1, 2, sometimes 3 miles away, flying it at very high altitudes, and then dropping it in. So in a lot of cases, prison guards can't hear the drones. They're coming in very stealthy. They're coming in at nighttime, and it's very difficult to know that these drones are flying in the airspace without some sort of drone detection technology. And then the last, like I mentioned, thankfully, we haven't seen a lot of this or any of it here in the United States yet, but we are seeing more of the terroristic type of activity over on the battlefield in Ukraine and in the Middle East, where again, it's only a matter of time. I think when people think about drones on the battlefield, a lot of times they think about drones as predator drones or these very large military style drones that they see. But I think the Ukraine incident has definitely highlighted the fact that they're taking DJI drones right off the shelf. They're strapping grenades to them, flying them into the battlefield, and they're no longer investing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on these military grade drones. They're buying a $350 drone at Walmart and they're strapping explosives to it and flying it into the battlefield. And so that's why I feel it's so important, especially for our large stadiums, our major music festivals like Coachella or Lollapalooza, and making sure that we're protecting large public gatherings, because that right there is probably the biggest concern when it comes to somebody doing something nefarious with a drone. Is these large public gatherings where you have a lot of people who are condensed in a very focused area. It makes a very big security problem when somebody could potentially fly a drone from 2 or 3 miles away with an explosive on it and fly it into a crowd. It's something that it needs to be taken very seriously. And we do a lot of work with these major music festivals, the NFL, the MLB, NASCAR, Formula One racing. These are all major events that have a lot of people at them. And we do a lot of work with every single one of those organizations that I just mentioned to protect the people who are attending these types of events. And so understanding this new threat that people are faced with, it's essentially forced everyone to take this traditional 2D approach that they've always had with security, where things like fences and walls and barbed wire and surveillance around the perimeter and security cameras, those have always been sufficient for centuries, right? I mean, there hasn't been a need to change that type of security posture. But in the last 10 years, everyone has really been forced to completely reassess their security posture and take their traditional 2D approach and look at more of a 3D approach and start looking towards the skies and how they can start combating this new and rapidly emerging threat that they're facing. And the capabilities that we can provide, whether it be with our DEDRONE RF sensors or a multi-layered solution, is how we have the ability to do that. So that's kind of a premise of the threat that we're facing here, the challenges that these different industries are facing. And with that, of course, at DEDRONE, we've had the ability to develop a wide variety of different solutions that address a lot of these types of concerns. And rather than speaking to these solutions in a sales format, I think I'll speak to them a little bit more in a functionality format of what exactly goes into these different types of solutions. And that way you can kind of understand the different levels of drone detection and airspace security that can be accomplished with a system like DDrone. So with the citywide drone detection, this is a network of sensors that is built out across the country. And I'll talk to each one of these in a little bit more detail here in a second. There's also multi-layered solutions that have radio frequency and cameras and radar that can all be built into a customized solution for a single location. There's also mobile solutions that are available, like a trailer, or even stripped down a little bit further than a trailer, sensors on tripods that can be moved around depending on where an agency or an organization may need drone detection on any given day. They can have these mobile solutions that can be moved around from event to event. And then the last one, and this is again one that I'll speak to a little about here, is what we call our DDrone Defender, which is a narrowband radio frequency jammer, or drone mitigation. There's a lot of different terms that can be utilized for it. Some people just call it shooting a drone out of the sky. But essentially, when it comes to leveraging the mitigation capabilities, this is something that is very highly regulated in the United States. And the reason that it's very highly regulated is the main risk or the main concern is with regard to the potential risk for collateral damage. So think about a drone that's flying overhead. You have a large music festival that's taking place, and rather than just going and making contact with the pilot and asking them to pull the drone out of the sky, let's say that drone mitigation technology was widely adopted and someone decided to jam the signal of the drone, and for some reason it fell out of the sky and landed on someone's head. And a drone these days, depending on the size of it, I don't care if it's even one of the smallest one, a Mavic Mini, if that thing falls out of the sky at 100 feet and lands on your head, it's going to ruin your day really quick. And there's even larger ones that can weigh significantly more and that could kill somebody as it comes landing down. And so this concern for collateral damage of bodily injury is one facet of it. And the other side is that this is a radio frequency jammer. So in the early days of radio frequency jamming, it would be more broadband jamming and jamming all of the signals. And the risk for collateral damage would be taking down other sorts of signals that you weren't intending to. So whether it be Wi-Fi signals or even potentially jamming a commercial airliner that's behind the drone that you didn't see, that would obviously be a very big problem. So the potential risk and the concern for collateral damage is one of the main reasons. The other reason is because currently the FAA still classifies a drone the same way that they classify a commercial airliner. At the end of the day, it's an aircraft that's flying in the sky. And as you can imagine, the FAA does not take too kindly to taking aircrafts out of the sky. So those are some of the complications that are involved in the regulatory landscape when it comes to mitigating a drone threat or shooting a drone out of the sky. Again, a lot of different buzzwords that you can use to talk about mitigating a drone. But those are some of the high level reasons why it is so highly regulated. Now, there are, of course, some agencies that do have authorization to do it, mainly your large three-letter federal agencies that have the authorization to do it. And it is being heavily debated right now about whether or not there should be authorization for public safety agencies to be able to mitigate a drone threat. Because if you do think about it, if there is a drone that is obviously going to cause harm at something like a NFL stadium or any sort of large venue, that is something that could potentially be catastrophic. And given how quickly this threat is emerging, I think it's very important that we kind of reassess these rules and regulations and these laws and give that authorization to local public safety. It's probably something that's going to take several years to implement. There will be very heavy oversight to make sure that it's done safely and that there aren't any unintended consequences of drone mitigation. But this is something that is being very heavily debated right now and something that we do see changing in the near future. at least a start to a change in the right direction. So that's just kind of a quick overview. I wanted to focus a little bit on the DDrone Defender there and the regulations behind mitigation. But let's talk a little bit about these different types of solutions and the different types of sensors that go into creating this high quality airspace awareness. So the first one here that I mentioned was our citywide drone detection. Now, the reason I wanted to mention this is because what you see here is an aeroscope. And for those of you who don't know that term or what an aeroscope is, this is a type of sensor that was very widely adopted by a lot of agencies and organizations across the globe. Probably one of the most popular types of sensors over the last 5 to 7 years. And it has tremendous capability. It has range up to 10 to 15. We've even seen some detections, depending on the environment, out to 25 and 30 miles. So a single sensor has a tremendous amount of capability and can detect drones out to a very, very far range. But the limitation is that this sensor is manufactured by DJI. And if you're not familiar with DJI, DJI is the most widely adopted and the largest manufacturer of drones in the industry. Anytime you go to Walmart or Best Buy or anything like that, you're likely looking at a DJI drone. They have a wide variety of different models, but it makes up anywhere, depending on the location, it could be anywhere from 75 to 85 or 90% of the drones, commercially or not commercially, but used by hobbyists, makes up almost a majority of the drones in the industry. So that's why this sensor was extremely popular with a lot of agencies. They said, hey, we could put a single aeroscope on our rooftop. It'll detect most drones that are in the airspace. We get tremendous range. And because this is a proprietary technology from DJI, there's no violation of privacy to get extremely detailed information off of the drone. Things like the serial number off the drone, telemetry information, the pilot location. That's also a very common question that we get in the drone detection industry is, do we have the ability to detect the pilot? Now, if we're talking about an aeroscope and detecting a DJI drone, then yes, we could definitely locate that pilot. Other drones, we'll talk about that here in a second and how some of the regulations limit other types of radio frequency detection. But another important educational piece about the aeroscope is that it was actually discontinued by DJI about a year and a half ago. So they are no longer making these. They're almost impossible to find in the industry these days. And that is why with DDRONE, we have this network of sensors that is already built out across the country. And so you can almost think of our citywide drone detection as the early days of cell phone coverage. So if you fall within cell phone coverage, or in our case, sensor coverage, then you have the ability to just simply subscribe to a data feed without having to install any hardware on site. And you just get the feed directly off the existing sensor that's in the general area. So if you're within 10 to 15 miles of one of these existing sensors, you do have the ability to just simply subscribe and get that high level drone detection. So, but it is high level. So the limitation here is that it only has the ability to detect DJI drones. So if there's a risk of other types of drones in the airspace, and there's a wide variety of different types of drones, Autel, Skydio, Parrot, I mean, the list goes on and on. There's about 60 different manufacturers of drones, and there's hundreds of different models. And so now that there's been a pretty large adoption of non-DJI drones, because if you think about it, people will go to Amazon, let's say it's Christmas time, and you're looking to get your niece or nephew or your son or daughter a drone for Christmas. Well, you go to Amazon, that's probably the first place that a lot of people turn to see if they can find one. And you see a DJI drone for, let's just say $500, $600. And then you see a non-DJI drone, just kind of a no-name brand with a lot of the same specs. It has the same type of camera. It's got the same kind of fly time. It's got great reviews, but it's an off-brand type of drone, and it's only $150 or less. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people are starting to purchase these non-DJI drones, which is causing an increase of these non-DJI drones in the airspace. And so people are starting to realize, hey, this aeroscope is missing a lot of drones in my airspace. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of non-DJI drones starting to fly now. And so it's forcing people to kind of take a step back and look at, okay, well, if the aeroscope was great for our initial step, almost think of it as kind of a crawl, walk, run approach. If it was great for that first step, what are some additional technologies and what are some additional methodologies that we can implement at our location to increase the coverage so that we can start to detect all of these non-DJI drones and all of the other drones that are flying in the airspace? And the answer to that is taking a multi-sensored solution approach. So this is one area where I will plug DEDRONE, and the particular sensor that we develop is our radio frequency sensor that you see here. It's this white sensor. And with our sensor, we also have what's called a radio frequency library, where you can detect approximately 300 different unique models of drones, about 60 different manufacturers. And I did hear some feedback there. Is there any questions on any of that so far? Nope. All right, we'll keep going. And so as I was saying, the DDrone RF sensor has that ability to detect everything, including DJI and all of the other makes and models. So again, over 60 different manufacturers, about 300 different unique models of drones. And so this would be kind of the next natural progression for expanding an existing aeroscope deployment. Or if somebody's starting new, again, as I had mentioned, because those aeroscopes have been discontinued and there's no more of them available to install at a new location, this is where the DDrone RF sensor would be used as kind of that foundational layer. So if you look at it from kind of a stepping stone approach, radio frequency is really the foundation when it comes to drone detection. With that foundation, it can then be scaled to include all kinds of other types of sensor modalities based on the performance and the functionality that you're looking to accomplish. So the next natural layer would be to incorporate what's called a PTZ camera, or a pan tilt zoom camera. And essentially, what these are designed to do is that as soon as the radio frequency sensors localize the position of a drone, those cameras are cued to then go immediately lock in on the drone, get visual confirmation of it, and see exactly what we're looking at. Is it an actual threatening drone that has a payload attached to it? Or is it just a hobbyist that is flying to get some cool footage for their YouTube channel or something along those lines? So that would be the next natural progression, is to incorporate cameras into a counter drone or a drone detection deployment. And then the last option would be to also include radar. And there's two things to know about radar. So the first thing is that radar is phenomenal because it detects everything. Radar can also be a little problematic sometimes because it does detect everything. It detects birds, it detects pretty much anything that's flying through the air. Now, I will say radar manufacturers have done a phenomenal job, as you know. I mean, we're very closely partnered with Matrix Space, and the radars have become very advanced to the point where those false positives have been reduced significantly. And because of that, the radar capability has improved drastically. And when you combine all of these layers, it also provides extremely high quality airspace awareness. So the reason that radars are so important, particularly with the emerging threat of what's called dark drones, or drones that are flying by waypoint, drones that are flying fully autonomously, the only way to detect these is going to be with radar. So as these threats continue to emerge, it's important to be able to factor in all of these different layers into a comprehensive solution that's going to give you the most high quality airspace awareness that can detect pretty much anything that's flying in the airspace. And so if the radar panel does detect something, then it can be instantly locked in on by the camera. We can confirm, hey, is this a drone? Is it a bird? What are we looking at? And then either alert the operator or not. And again, by taking this multi-layered solution, it gives organizations the opportunity to kind of scale their security posture based on the security or the threat profile that they're looking at with drones in their airspace. And so kind of revisiting that stepping stone process, I would recommend kind of going with that foundational layer of radio frequency, scaling to cameras, and then also incorporating radars. as they continue to kind of expand their capabilities there. And so that's kind of a high-level overview of the different types of sensors that are involved with drone detection and airspace security. And later in the presentation here, I'll talk about how a lot of these same capabilities, particularly the radars and the cameras, are utilized for that enablement of good drones to be able to fly further. Because again, detecting a small object in the air is very difficult. It's not easy to do. And being able to leverage the system to detect those small objects is something that we've perfected over the last decade. And so the natural transition to take that same foundational technology and leverage it to detect much larger objects like helicopters and low-flying aircrafts, or really anything that's flying at a lower altitude, is a natural transition for the DEDRONE platform, and can create that high-quality airspace awareness to deconflict the airspace and make sure that the drone can safely fly from point A to point B without crashing into anything else. So we'll talk about that here in a second. But I also wanted to just kind of bring up what at the end of the day, going through all those different sensors, it can get a little confusing sometimes of, okay, well, what exactly does a system do? And what we focus on and what we've perfected is the sensor fusion, taking all of these different sensor inputs, everything that I just mentioned here, the radio frequency detection, the cameras, the radar, any other sort of third-party inputs, and fusing that all into a single track to create the most accurate and high quality track of an object as real time as possible in a single pane of glass, and really just simplify it all down. So taking all of that stuff that I just mentioned, pulling it into a single pane of glass, a single track, and that also enables a lot of other capabilities on the right-hand side that you see here, where depending on the application, and if we're talking about the military or if we're talking about other countries, we could then trigger things like the mitigation. Or there's a lot of organizations that already have existing systems that they have for access control or any other sort of management systems that they have at their facility. And so if a facility does have a type of system like this, there's really no need to look at the DEDRONE tracker interface, but we're more than happy to just kind of push all of that data into a single existing tool and allow people to leverage the existing technology they've already invested in. And then also, of course, things like push notifications, text messages, emails, getting alerted of the different types of drone detections that are taking place in the airspace. And just to give you a little idea of what that might look like, right? So you have a facility here, you have your sensors that are up on the rooftop, you've got different alerting zones so that you want to know if a drone does breach a certain area. And then you can, in real time, see exactly where a drone is taking off, its exact flight path, where it's heading to. If we have a point of interest, like you can see here, these arrows pointing in this direction, we could even do some calculations and tell you in real time that based on the speed that the drone is flying right now, here's approximately how long it'll take to reach your facility. So you can have an understanding of how long you have to be able to react and respond to the situation. And one of the things I wanted to point out on this page here is the fact that you can see that there are multiple different sensors. And I think that this is a good point to be able to speak a little bit about the regulatory landscape of radio frequency detection and the different laws and regulations that we'll just say that it complicates or makes it a little bit more complex to do radio frequency detection when we're not talking about an aeroscope. And so if you recall earlier in the presentation when I was talking about that aeroscope, you could use a single sensor and get a bunch of very robust information off of the DJI drone. Well, when we're talking about a technology like the DEDRONE RF sensors, in order to legally triangulate or legally localize the position of the drone, we would have to use multiple sensors to triangulate the position of it. And that's how we can do that without violating people's privacy. Because there's one regulatory body that regulates this, and it's the FCC, who says that communication signal between the remote control and the drone that's a communication signal. And in order to get the very robust information like the serial number or additional telemetry information and things like that, you would essentially have to decode that signal, pull the information out, and then that's where you would receive it. And doing that would violate people's privacy, particularly the laws that regulate that are the wiretap and the pin trap laws. And because of that, we do not have the ability to provide this single sensor solution that decodes the signal of the drone and pulls information out of it. And as a result, we have to use multiple sensors to triangulate the position of the drone. And this is, again, speaking of the regulatory landscape, this is something that is also being very heavily debated about whether or not decoding should be legal or illegal, and does it violate people's privacy. And there's also additional terms that you may hear in the industry these days, one of them particularly called remote ID, where essentially, if you think about it, remote ID is kind of designed to be almost kind of like a digital license plate for drones. And the recent regulation was that anybody who's flying a drone needs to be broadcasting their remote ID, which is kind of telling everyone, hey, this is who I am, and I'm allowed, or not necessarily allowed, but I'm in compliance with all the rules and regulations. Now, the problem with remote ID is that, of course, if you can imagine, if somebody's trying to do something nefarious, are they going to be broadcasting their location or their information and letting everyone know who they are? Probably not, unless they're a very dumb criminal. And in that case, they probably deserve to get caught. But without the wide adoption of remote ID, and it is slowly becoming more and more adopted, but it does require people to either update their firmware on their drone or purchase a new one. So there's a bit of an adoption process when it comes to remote ID. So it's still extremely important to have these multi-layered approaches to detect radio frequency and triangulate the position of the drone, have the cameras, have the radars, so that you have that complete airspace coverage, and make sure that there is no ability for a drone to enter the airspace unknown or undetected. So that's kind of a little bit of an overview on some of the regulatory landscape behind radio frequency detection and some of the things that could be changing. Again, all of those things that I mentioned about decoding and the wiretap and pin trap laws, those are also actively being debated right now as well. And we could see some changes with regard to those capabilities in the future, and would just enhance drone detection and give more robust information off of the drones. Now, we don't need to necessarily go on the traditional customer journey. Like I said, this is the typical radio frequency would be the start, going to PTZ cameras, adding radar. That is what we typically see when somebody is kind of scaling their program, because this is still very new to a lot of people, a lot of organizations, and it's very difficult to go from no drone detection at all to a full-blown multi-layered solution that's doing cameras and radar and all of those different capabilities. So kind of taking that crawl, walk, run approach is something that we always recommend with every organization that we work with, and just kind of scale based on the needs that they see, and get some quick wins. Get a couple good detections, make sure that you have familiarity with the system, and then continue to scale your operations from there. Now, the next couple here we'll go over fairly quickly, just because I do want to spend some time on the DEDRONE Beyond and enablement side of things. But again, taking all of those sensors, putting them onto a trailer unit, that would be a mobile solution. We do see that this is very popular with your larger organizations who don't know where they're going to need drone detection on any given day. They may need it at a music festival one day, and they might need it in downtown the next day. And having a mobile solution, particularly all mounted on a trailer, is very effective for that, and it gives them the ability to rapidly deploy this at any sort of location. And then there are some that may need something even more stripped down, which would be our portable solution, which is just basically a single sensor on a tripod. So there are capabilities with that as well. But like I said, I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit more towards the enablement side of things and spend the last couple of minutes talking about what we call DEDRONE Beyond, and leveraging that same foundational technology, everything that I just mentioned, and leveraging it for airspace awareness and detecting things like helicopters, airplanes, and enabling good drones to be able to fly. And I think the main thing to understand with drone flight and drone operations right now is that the current regulation from the FAA is that you do need to maintain that visual line of sight of your drone at all times. And so, as you can imagine, things like drone package delivery or drone as a first responder, these things become very limited in their ability to scale when it comes to if you have to maintain that visual line of sight. And the whole reason that we've developed this is because if we have the ability to build out the infrastructure for high quality airspace awareness around a metropolitan area, or really any area for that matter, it gives all these different types of stakeholders, whether it be public safety or Amazon or Walmart or the local hospitals that need to do medical device delivery, it gives them the ability to have that infrastructure in place so that they can confidently launch a drone, fly it to a location, and know that there is a system in place that's detecting everything else in the airspace and alerting a pilot if there is a low-flying aircraft that's potentially going to cause a near mid-air collision or something along those lines, and allow that pilot to take an avoidance maneuver. And right now, there's been some progress with that. So for example, the Chula Vista Police Department has been kind of on the forefront of pioneering some of the advancements of their drone as a first responder program. And so they have human visual observers strategically positioned around their city that give them the ability to maintain that visual line of sight of their drones and kind of expand their operational area. But if you think about it, from a scalability perspective, having humans standing on rooftops and looking at the sky, trying to make sure that these drones aren't crashing into aircrafts, while it is a good start and is progressing the industry and moving the conversation in the right direction, it has definitely showed some hurdles when it comes to its scalability. Because if you think about it, if you're standing, I don't know if anybody saw the recent news, but I think Las Vegas just reached an all-time record high of 120 degrees. I don't think that there's going to be too many humans standing on rooftops for 6 or 7 hours a day in 120 degrees in Las Vegas or Phoenix, Arizona, or Dallas, Texas, where it can get up into the high 100s as well. It's not practical to do that. And also on the other side of things, think about Detroit, Michigan in the middle of winter, or any other really cold place in the middle of winter. It's just not practical to have humans standing on these rooftops to do this. And so we believe that leveraging a technological solution, particularly radars and cameras, will give that ability to create what we call a digital visual observer or virtual visual observer. There's a lot of different terms that are going around for it right now, but building out these nodes. So if you think about each one of these units here as a node and strategically placing these nodes around a city will essentially network together an operational area and create that high quality airspace awareness that allow people to operate their drones in a safe manner that would eventually, I mean, it would need to get approved by the FAA for that operational area to ensure the safety and security of the system, the stability of it, reliability, all of these things. There's a lot of checks and balances that go in place to it, but it's important to kind of address all of these different things. Let's see here. I just realized that there are some questions in the chat here, so I will address these here. I'll jump to the next couple. We essentially have two flavors of this. We have our radar side of things, which I personally believe will become the gold standard eventually. Cameras are great. They're more cost effective, of course, but there's limitations to cameras. You can't really utilize them very well at night. Any sort of low visibility conditions, nighttime operations, these are all things that are limiting factors to an optical based solution. And so radar, I believe, will be the primary methodology to build out these networks of infrastructure across a major metropolitan area. And essentially, the goal here is to allow for an operator, as you can see here, to be really anywhere and be able to launch a drone. And if it's a DFR operation, launch that drone, get it on site, and not to have to have any human intervention or humans standing on rooftops to deconflict the airspace. Leveraging these sensors to detect and identify the crewed aviation that's in the airspace and allow that drone to safely make its way to the scene and be on scene for that particular operation. And again, this applies to pretty much any sort of drone operations, whether you're talking about drone package delivery or medical device delivery, this is applicable to all of them. And I think that there's a lot of progress that's being made in this particular space right now when it comes to drone enablement. It's definitely something that I'm very passionate about, because when you look at public safety agencies around the country, they've been extremely short-staffed with some of the defund the police initiatives around the country. It's been very difficult from a recruitment side of things. And at the end of the day, the safety and security of our communities is what's most important, and something that kind of drives me every single day to continue to develop these technologies. And if we have the ability to leverage these drones for faster response times, allow our public safety agencies to be more efficient, allow our public safety officers to more intelligently respond to situations by having situational intelligence of what's taking place at that scene so they can respond appropriately. There's a very big difference between responding to a 911 call where there could potentially be somebody with a gun or a firearm. Well, if you can get a drone on scene and confirm that, hey, this person does not have a firearm, it drastically changes that public safety response significantly, and can ultimately reduce the potential for loss of life. So not only does it improve the public safety's efficiency and response times and the way that they respond, but ultimately it also is very, very effective at improving the safety of the community as a whole. So it's something that I'm very passionate about. And while public safety does have that initial immediate need, I think it's also very exciting that we have this opportunity to kind of usher in the next wave of technology to make things like drone package delivery very available and safe to do. Medical device delivery, search and rescue. I mean, the list goes on and on about how drones can be utilized. But I think the limiting factor is with regard to the infrastructure and the lack of it. And so it's something that I think that we have a huge opportunity to kind of build out this infrastructure, and it's pretty exciting on that side. So I'll pause there, or I'll wrap things up there. Like I said, I was not paying attention to the chats as we were going through this, so I will kind of scroll through here, see if there was any questions that I didn't get to or I didn't see as I was going through that.
There was really only one there, Travis, with regards to the remote ID and whether or not DEDRONE is picking up the broadcast remote ID information and what information is actually available to those using DEDRONE.
It does. So DEDRONE, all of our DEDRONE RF sensors are remote ID enabled. There's two different flavors of remote ID. There's Wi-Fi and there's Bluetooth. Right now, all of our DEDRONE sensors are Wi-Fi enabled. We're in the process of developing one that has the ability to pick up all of the Bluetooth remote ID. It's a little tricky when it comes to kind of combining those two. There's also very, very cost-effective just standalone remote ID sensors that are out there. By no means am I advocating for a remote ID only solution. As I had mentioned, there's limited adoption of remote ID so far. And so I still think it's very important to have kind of a multi-layered approach. But if somebody is interested in just kind of checking out remote ID, there are very cost-effective solutions that are just remote ID only sensors, not even DEDRONE RF sensors. While all of our sensors are remote ID enabled, there's also just kind of off-mark or non-DEDRONE remote ID only sensors that people can investigate as well. So I just think that it's important to understand from an educational purpose that there are other solutions out there for remote ID only.
Perfect, thank you. And I don't see any other questions there in the chat box, but if anyone has, oh, Charles, you raised your hand, go ahead. I would just say unmute and jump on in.
Got Charles. Oh
Hey,
no.
Travis.
What's going on, Charles?
No, I just want to put on my Virginia Department of Aviation hat for a minute and say that, one, working with Virginia Innovative Partnership Corporation, Public Safety Innovation Center, DEDRONE's really been at the center of us really starting to understand airspace awareness by having the trailer, moving it around to multiple locations to really get an idea of just what's happening in space around the Capitol. Just recently had it at the drone show that was put on by Virginia over the governor's mansion. And I think during the day, as I understand it from DJ Smith from Virginia State Police, that they detected 94 drones that were operating in the area for the event. Fortunately, it was all in Class G airspace, so it wasn't too many violations they had to chase down, but there weren't any during the actual drone show, which is pretty impressive. So I just wanted to give that shout out to DEDRONE for the work they're doing there and what a difference it's made in Virginia. And I just want to reinforce what you said. The enabling of drones and the investment made for this to understand the airspace awareness is going to be key to that other stuff. The deliveries, the drones as a first responder, and as you mentioned, the visual observer, the person is the most expensive cost of the DFR program. So all of this is really great, and you guys are doing some great work.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for sharing that, Charles. Laura, I see your hands there raised. If you want to unmute and jump in.
Sure. Hi, Travis. My name's Laura Dwyer. I work for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and we have the largest fleet of research ships in the world. And so right now I'm the chief of our UAS division, and we're working on an initiative to do beyond visual line of sight off of our ships. And at the moment, we're struggling with DAA in the maritime. So I was just curious if you had any information or if that was, a realm that you were going to try and break into, or, what additional products, capabilities are out there. We recently put out an RFI just for our SUAS maritime radar just operations. So yeah, any information or help would be great.
Yeah, no, I mean, ultimately it's a much more involved discussion because it gets into the whole difference between 2D radar versus 3D radar. And typically if I was talking about a metropolitan area, I would say, nope, we absolutely have to look at 3D radar, which increases the cost, increases the kind of, or reduces the range. But when you're talking about maritime, there's no buildings out there, right? There's no trees or obstructions that you have to worry about. And in those cases, 2D radar is actually a very good solution for the airspace awareness on the ocean, at least. So depending on the exact use case, how far you're looking to fly, all of those things are kind of the factor there. And I don't know, I mean, Charles may even be able to speak more intelligently. I don't know what the regulations are about flying over the ocean and what if the FAA regulates that, or who you're in international waters, right? So who's regulating? I'm a little unsure of the regulatory landscape of that, but I can speak to the technological side of things and what we would be able to provide. One of the great things about DEDRONE is that we're sensor agnostic, right? So whether we're talking about an extremely long range radar that's 3-dimensional or a long range 2-dimensional radar, we work with all of the large radar manufacturers so we can customize a solution that can meet your needs. But then it kind of gets into the regulatory landscape of, okay, who's approving this and who is, like, what type of COA it needs to be submitted and how that needs to be drafted. Those are parts where I would be a little, I'd be a little hamstrung on my knowledge when it comes to that. But of course, I mean, we have a wide network of people that we work with that could probably bring a bunch of very intelligent people together to navigate that.
Thank you, Travis, for that. Laura, hopefully you and Travis can connect offline and continue that conversation. I'm sure that he can help with some of those gaps for you. Let's see, we've got one other question here from Sonnet. Are you planning to fit these sensors, specifically the radar, onto the drone itself towards sense and avoid capabilities?
Interesting that you asked that question. So we are always looking to expand the technology. We've played around a little bit so far with mobile sensors. So the first step of this was having mobile sensors that could be attached to things like vehicles that are actively moving. Well, I guess first it was the trailer that would be able to be mobile and stood up somewhere as a stationary. Then it was vehicles to make sure that we can effectively do it as the vehicles are moving. And the next phase is to move it to the air and see how we can do this in the air. There's a huge race right now where a lot of companies, particularly the drone manufacturers themselves, that are looking to do onboard or on-ship detect and avoid. And so there's a lot of different ways that this is being approached. Some of them are doing optical, some of them are doing acoustic, some of them are looking into radar. But at the end of the day, the hard part is that all of this increases the weight on the drone. And anytime you increase the weight of the drone, You're starting to reduce battery time and fly time and things like that. So it's still a bit of a challenge right now, but I do see the industry moving in that direction.
Wonderful, thank you. We've got one other here from Charles. Does DEDRONE DAA solution meet the ASTM standard?
It does. So part of the kind of validation process, we don't just kind of put radars up and say, hey, trust us, we can avoid at these ranges. We go through a very rigorous third-party validation process, and what has been identified from the FAA as kind of the gold standard behind third-party validation is Virginia Tech, and what's called the MAP test site is the Mid-Aviation Atlantic Partnership. And so we have partnered with them on all of our third-party validations so that not only do we say that our sensors can detect at these ranges, but that they have third-party validated that, they've modeled it, and they can confirm that our sensors, when fused with the DEDRONE sensor fusion, can detect at the ranges that they say.
Fantastic. All right, I think we've managed to clear out all of our questions, unless there's any last minute ones there. Going once, going twice. Well, I just wanted to thank you, Travis, for your time today and all the wonderful information. We definitely enjoyed the way you told the stories of your product. It definitely didn't feel like a sales pitch, so thank you. I wanted to also let everyone know that in the chat box, I've just shared a link to our partner, Embry-Riddle. They have done some overhaul on some of the offerings that they are doing with the partnership between Women in Drones and Embry-Riddle. They are looking to kind of focus in on unlocking career potential. So definitely check that out if you haven't had an opportunity to. And I see, Charles, you've got your hand up. So before I dive into next meetings and that good stuff, hop on in here.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know that Drone Responders has launched a new working group called the Women Drone Responders. And our goal
Wonderful.
is to capture the successes of women that are actually doing the flying, do interviews, and make that available, and to have some programs where we are promoting to girls and women the opportunities in aviation. So just wanted to share that with you all.
Fantastic. If you've got a link there, Charles, I'd love for you to share that in our chat box down below there.
Still a little bit early.
Okay. So this is like brand new unveiling.
Yeah, you guys are hearing it first. It's getting ready to come out very soon. So I'll send you that information in the future that you can share once we have it.
Wonderful. Well, kind of piggybacking on that idea, we've got Dr. Robin Murphy with us next Executive Council meeting. That will be August 7th. She is very deeply into drones and being on the responder side of things. She is the, let's see, I'll get her title proper here. The Raytheon Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at Texas A&M University. So if you haven't had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Murphy or seeing any of her TED Talks or discussions, she has been in robotics for quite some time and working in disaster response with robotics in general. Her discussion August 7th will focus in on drones and women to the rescue. So I hope that you will join us next month. Thank you all for your time today. And we look forward to doing this again next month.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Travis.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye, everyone.